And good morning once again, my brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ at Living Hope Community Church in Iglesia Esperanza Viviente and throughout the world. We're so thankful to God that you're here today, and we're doing a few things different today. This is the first day we will explore First Chronicles. We finished Second Kings last time, and this is the first time in the history of Living Hope today that we will cover 9 chapters in one day. Chronicles is a very interesting book. Let me show you. When you think about the Old Testament, we've done this in the past. I just want to remind you of it. You get to the Pentateuch, the 5 books of the law. There's wisdom, there's poetry, there's the prophets. But right now, we've been in the history section. All right? These are the books listed in the history section. We are now going to look at Chronicles. Remember that Chronicles is really just one story from beginning to end through First and Second Chronicles, but because it took 2 scrolls to write these down, they were divided into First and Second Chronicles. But one thing you need to know, the Bible we use is not the same as the Hebrew Bible in terms of its order. All right, in Judaism, they list Chronicles at the very end of the Hebrew Bible. This is the last book they put in their scriptures, and this basically summarizes what happened all the way from Adam. And just to think about it, the author of this book is unknown, but we know that the author wrote the book maybe a few hundred years, 100 to 200 years after there was a return from exile. Remember at the end of Second Kings, Judah is exiled to Babylon. Well, Judah returns, all right? Those 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, plus the Levites, they return to the promised land, and the writer of Chronicles knows that. So he writes after that happened. There's a couple of themes in this book. One is there's the hope of the Messianic King, and that'll be emphasized as we look at the life of King David. And there's a hope for a new temple. Remember that when Babylon destroyed Jerusalem, the temple went with it. So chapters 1 through 9 of this book, the reason we're covering all of them today is it's a list of names. It's a genealogy listing of all the most important characters in Israel's history. It's like a big summation. 2 main genealogies are emphasized. There's the genealogy of Judah. Remember when Jacob blesses Judah in the book of Genesis, he says, the scepter, you're going to be the ruler. Well, we know that the Messianic King, even the Lord Jesus, will come through the line of Judah, and his line, the line of Judah, is emphasized in Chronicles. Also, the line of Aaron and Levi, the priesthood, is a part of the emphasis. But one thing you want to see in this is there's a leaning towards being very positive. King David is portrayed very positively as a type of the coming Messianic King. In other words, the story of David's adultery, the story of David murdering Bathsheba's wife, these kinds of things are left out as the Chronicles recalls the history of the people. All right, that's not necessarily bad. It's just positivity is there. So just to give you an example, chapter 1, you'll read the genealogies and just understand that to you and me, this looks like a list of names, and we might be tempted to say, well, who cares about that list of names? I can't pronounce them anyway. Don't know anything about most of these people except they had their name listed right here. And so why should I bother with that? Well, just understand that to the Jewish believer, these genealogies are essential and critical. They determine who owns the land as the promised land is opened up by God delivering his people there. In the end, they're very fastidious about keeping records and understanding who came from who, where they lived, and if they did anything exceptional. If you look at First Chronicles, it goes all the way back to Adam, all right? And it starts to trace the lines of heritage Noah and his sons are included there, the Japhethites and the Hamites. These are pagan occupiers of the promised land, enemies of God's people, and yet they are noted as where they come from. The Semites, we see Abraham and his son Isaac, born by Sarah, plus then the lineage of children after that, Abraham and Hagar's son Ishmael, plus Ishmael's descendants, Abraham and Keturah's sons, plus their descendants. We see Esau's sons. We see the Edomites and their rulers. Again, we're being brought forward through the history of Israel, and these genealogies even include the powers that will be overthrown as God's people enter the promised land, specifically here the Edomites. So let's go back and just look at a slide we saw a long time ago. In 1 Chronicles 2, you'll see what was largely described in Genesis 30. You started with Jacob. He has babies with Leah. They have Reuben, they have Simeon, they have Levi, they have Judah, they have, then he has babies with Bilhah, his handmaid. She has Dan and Naphtali. Then you see Zilpah, the handmaiden, again come into play. She has Gad and Asher. Then back to Leah, she has Issachar and Zebulun. And then if you recall, Rachel shows up at the end. She's childless for a while, but then she has Joseph. He's the gift from God. Then she has Benjamin, and he's the son of my distress. Okay? Now I want you to see something here. Levi and Judah are the two main tribes that are emphasized in terms of the genealogies found in 1 Chronicles. Okay, well, as we move out of chapter 2 and move forward through these other chapters of names, you'll see that all these sons of Jacob, their descendants are listed. Maybe not all, but most, except in these listings, Dan is not included in terms of his descendants, and Zebulun is not included in terms of his descendants. An interesting note, why is it? Well, you could make something big out of it, but the inclusion will come in the Messianic Kingdom, so we're not going to go too far with it here, but just notice the main emphasis on the genealogies are between Levi and Judah, the priesthood and the royal line, okay? When you get to chapter 3, you're going to learn about the sons of David born while he was in Hebron, and then the sons of David born while he was in Jerusalem, and then you'll learn about the kings of Judah. Now that should be pretty fresh for us. We just got out of looking at all these kings in the southern kingdom and the things they did, whether they were evil in the eyes of the Lord or did right in the eyes of the Lord. You'll notice in that list I have Athaliah as the lady who was queen for 6 years, but she's not mentioned at all in the genealogies of Chronicles. All right, you get to chapters 3, 4, and 5. Again, those are the sons born. You get to the kings, but one thing that happens in 3:17 that's kind of interesting, the descendants of Joachim, the captive, are listed in 3:17, or at least it starts there. What's that telling us? It's telling us that the author understands the bloodline from the king that went into exile. In other words, the exile has been concluded because the lineage is being traced all the way through the exile. Chapter 4 emphasizes the descendants of Judah. Chapter 5 emphasizes the descendants of Jacob's son. And every now and then in these 9 chapters, you get this little emphasis, like a little story that kind of comes out of nowhere. I'll show you one. In 1 Chronicles 4, there's been name after name after name after name after name, the occasional place after place after place, and now you get to 4:9, and this guy named Jabez shows up. We're not really told much about him at all. We're just told he was more honorable than his brothers. His mother had named him Jabez, saying, "I gave birth to him in pain." Jabez cried out to the God of Israel, "Oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my territory. Let your hand be with me and keep me from harm so that I will be free from pain." And God granted his request. So you get this little story of a guy named Jabez, and it's wedged in to this list of names. You can read these first 9 chapters for yourself if you like to see what else the author includes in terms of footnotes and addendums. I'll give you one more in First Chronicles 5. Here's a story again. We're talking about the Reubenites here and a couple other tribes. Well, they waged war against the Hagrites, Jetur, Naphish, and Nodab. They were helped in fighting them, and God handed the Hagrites and all their allies over to them because they cried out to him during battle, and he answered their prayers because they trusted him. Okay, so here is a story of a successful military campaign being successful because God is the one that intervened on behalf of his people to give them the victory. They trusted in him. All right. You just get these little footnotes, and then it's back to names and back to places. I'll let you read those things for yourself. Chapter 6 starts with the sons of Levi, and the priests are emphasized. We start going through that. You need to remember something here. Judah and Benjamin were the 2 tribes of the southern kingdom, right? You remember? Well, here's something for you. Judah and Benjamin and the Levitical priests, these are the tribes that returned to the promised land after the exile was over. The other 10 tribes scattered. These are brought back to the promised land. All right, we'll see that more fully when we get to Ezra and Nehemiah. But chapter 7, again, more of Jacob's sons and their descendants. Chapter 8, we turn a little bit here. We start to talk about Saul. Remember, Saul's the first king of Israel. He is a Benjamite, right? Chapter 9, we get the genealogy of the returned exiles. Again, that's very critical to understand. That tells us again that the author of First Chronicles has already experienced the exile and is back into the promised land, all right? Chapter 10 is interesting, and that's where we're going to pick it up next time. But just to give you where the history starts to be recalled is in chapter 10. It recalls the death of King Saul and his sons, and then it prepares us for what the rest of the book of First Chronicles is going to be about, and that's King David. All right, so by the time you get to chapter 10, you're out of the names, and you're out of the places, and you're out of those little addendums that get added every now and then, and you begin to look at what happened with King Saul and what happened with King David. These stories will be familiar. Many of them are just pure repetition, and some of them are repetition with particular emphasis or repetition and the addition of new information. It's interesting, though, that the Bible isn't like any other religious book. This is a book that has names and places, and there's no mistaking that history is being recorded. This isn't some ethereal religious prose. This is history, lending itself again to the reality that Scripture is true and trustworthy. Anyway, that's where we're going to end it today. We'll pick it up in 1 Chronicles 10 next time. God bless you, church. Serve him well.
Who is it who for sinners shed his blood, and now for cleansing all can plunge beneath that flood? It's Jesus. But do you know who he is? He's the image of the invisible God, and he's the brightness of the future, the past,